Time I call the member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Today I speak in favour of the Defence Superannuation Bill 2015. Deputy Speaker, I support this bill because the people of Lindsay have long had a firm relationship with our Defence Forces. Even to this day, the Lindsay electorate is surrounded by and includes many defence bases. To our north, Richmond RAF Base. To our west, we have the Glenbrook Air Force Command. Inside the electorate, we have Orchard Hills RAF Base and, of course, the Penrith Engineers that still call the region home. Of course, it is the defence personnel and the defence history that even brought my mother's family to the Penrith region when my grandfather worked in the munitions site on the north side of Penrith, now called Thornton. Lindsay is very proud of our key military history. In fact, Lindsay, named after Norman Lindsay, a lot of Norman Lindsay's work was about the recruitment of young people into the armies and the cartoons and caricatures that he had drawn. We do deeply respect our Defence Forces, and we do honour and respect what they have done in keeping our country strong, free and safe. Whether it even be today with the efforts in the Middle East with peacekeeping missions, national security or analysing intelligence, the men and women who take part in our forces are the backbone behind the life that we today take for granted and the peace in which we live. Deputy Speaker, we are reminded that yesterday was Vietnam Veterans Day, and we commemorated not only the 1966 Battle of Long Tan, but the whole war, where much of the fighting took place with small enemy groups who used the dense forests and tunnelling systems to ambush Allied troops. At the Battle of Long Tan, 18 Australians were killed. While estimates place enemy deaths at well over 1,000, it is considered the first major conflict that engaged Australians during that war. We were outnumbered, but we held our ground. Yesterday was once a reminder of the heroics and the sacrifices our troops are prepared to make to defend the values that we hold so dear. We are also reminded that over the weekend of the 70th commemoration of VJ Day or VP Day, and in particular the end of World War II, where a nation was tortured by fear and sacrifice for 6 long years had finally tasted freedom. For the first time in years, we get a glimpse of that moment through those indelible images of people dancing in the streets and throwing hordes of thick ticker tape across the footpaths of our towns and our cities. We finally got to share in the joy of peace, and not before we endured the reality of some terrible costs. And it's not just the numbers of those that were killed and wounded, it's the stories, the imaginable stories, and the horrors of those that came back and had lost so much. Deputy Speaker, I was honoured last week to have heard a story of the journey of the member for Mulgoa, Tanya Davies' father, who also came home with many of these wounds. It was a war where people still get so much of a shiver up their spines. The mere mentions of the horrors of places like Sandakan and Batam, where people were sent on death marches. Or there is Borneo or Kokoda, where people were cannibalised. And in a bit over a month's time, Deputy Speaker, I'll be joining the Panthers on the Prow group with 11 wonderful young women from my community to trek Kokoda. There was also the Bermuda Railway, where people were so starved that their bones protrude through their skins. There was the horror of the Australian ship Centaur, a well-marked hospital ship that was mercilessly torpedoed just off the coast near Brisbane, drowning 268 nurses and medics. Raids on Darwin, in which we don't know the exact numbers of deaths, and further raids in Western Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, and in New South Wales and the infamous midget submarines that came into our harbour. Deputy Speaker, there is so many horrors that the war brought to the world and to our country. My grandfather, though a young man from Stanthorpe, was actually sent to the clean-up of Nagasaki only weeks after the bomb had been detonated. He also saw the extreme suffering of so many Japanese people in Nagasaki over that period of time. It was quite a horrific thing, and peace to the world, peace in the Pacific, is really something that the whole world should celebrate. Deputy Speaker, earlier this year, my electorate has paid so much tribute to so many of the Australians that have been killed in various theatres of war since the Sudan conflict in 1885. 102,807 poppies were laid. That's equivalent to more than 2 times the capacity of the SCG, and more than half that were killed during World War I, and especially on the battlefields of France and Belgium, Australians who gave and sadly continued to give. So today, Deputy Speaker, it is important, it is very important that we look at the sacrifice of our Defence Forces, and we do look how we do look after the Australian Defence Forces that do sacrifice so much so that we can live free. And it's important that we do provide the right superannuation to look after our Defence Forces. It is because these are the real Australian heroes, those men and women who tirelessly serve. I do support this bill as it recognises the need for a superannuation fund that better tailors to the needs of the Defence Force personnel. There is an old scheme that closed in 2001 before the Defence Force Retirement and Benefit Scheme, the DFRDB, and the current scheme, the Military Super Scheme. Military Super currently has around 56,500 contributing members and 96,000 members who are no longer contribute to the scheme as they have now left the Defence Forces, and 11,000 pensioners. This old military super scheme offers our defence personnel good benefits, but it doesn't give them the flexibility. Changing to a new scheme will open defence personnel a range of new access options to their pensions, especially for the over 55s, and more flexibilities over contributions and investment options. The current scheme has no portability arrangements for those who leave the forces, and access to the contributions is not available until the preservation age. Perhaps most significantly is the separation of superannuation scheme from the statutory death and invalidity cover. Deputy Speaker, this not only gives personnel more choice, but it also offers those who have other superannuation arrangements access to the death and invalidity scheme, a cover scheme. In broad options of these changes of the Defence Welfare Association and the Australian RSL, they broadly support this bill as it offers a modern superannuation scheme. As the new ADF superannuation scheme will offer fully portable benefits, personnel can choose any complying funds. They will not be forced to contribute 5% as they currently do. This new fund will be fully funded and invested and available to members in a lump sum from the age of 55. Deputy Speaker, the new arrangements are generous as well. The employer contribution rate for the Australian Defence Force superannuation scheme is 16.4%. Of the schemes currently available, only judges have a better pension arrangement. The Parliamentary Superannuation Accumulation Scheme, which has been in place for almost 11 years now, replacing more older, generous scheme, has 1% less than the contributions made to the new ADF scheme. This extra contribution recognises the special place the Australian Defence Force personnel have in our society, and it is a very small token, a small thank you for their commitment and their service. It's 70 years, Deputy Speaker, since the end of World War II, and it's 100 years since we landed on those fatal shores in Gallipoli. 130 years since the Sudan conflict, and 40 years since the end of Vietnam. 60 years since the outbreak of hostilities in Korea. We owe it to the men, women in our military to give back just a little when they have risked so much for all of us. Thank you.